This time, St Etienne topped the football charts, and how Panenka capped Czechoslovakia's unlikely European triumph.
And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt to decide once and for all who is the greatest football team of all time. Sometimes, like seeing Matt Letizia lining up behind a spot kick, greatness is assured. Other times, you see Pat Nevin make that cheeky half-turn, and a different greatness awaits. My name's Graham Dunn, crowbarring in Oxford United references where they don't belong, and joining me as ever is my fellow self-appointed arbiter of football greatness, Jamie Rooney. Hiya, Jamie.
Hello, Graham. Nice to see you again. I watched the Mick Hartford own goal that Jamie was talking about last week. I think it's fantastic, that story. I really love the fact that club legend Mick Hartford is doing the deed for Luton Town whilst playing for Derby County. And it kind of reminded me of a previous podcast we talked about when we did our pre-season friendlies and the Barbados-Grenada game where you've got teams deliberately scoring own goals and making no absolute disguise that that's their intention. Whereby Mick Hartford is kind of trying to play his game for Derby, but subtly, like Jamie's mentioned when he picked his time machine moment, he'd watch him and follow him because clearly he must have this idea. If the opportunity presents itself where I can save my old team, I'm going to take it with both hands. And he does. And it's a brilliant own goal.
It's close enough that it's one of those mysteries that you can never be 100% sure. Now he's safely back in the Luton camp. I think it's in Mick Harford's interest to sort of play up. It was deliberate rather than otherwise. But it's definitely done with a sort of grace and a style that you could easily be anything. Could easily be, I'll just knock that one on at the time. And so that's the Luton Town podcast. If you haven't heard, that's the one we did last week. It celebrates a lot of fun, that one. The other one that we've done as part of the new season so far is with Mark Griffiths on Wrexham, which is a brilliant tour, not just of what's been going on in the Hollywood years, and that's the team we focus on, but really we look at what it's been like supporting Wrexham for 30 years, which has largely not been a glorious period. You can catch those up in the feed. I recommend those. And a reminder, if you subscribe, you get a podcast, a new shiny podcast from us every Thursday. So please subscribe and like, and you get your guaranteed fix of by far the greatest team. So this week, because we are talking about the great French team, Saint Etienne. And Saint Etienne are a team, depending on when you were born, which either, if you're old enough, probably the first thing you do think of is the French football team of the 60s and 70s. Or if you're born in, the last 20 years, you probably don't think about them at all. But in a specific period, you'd be thinking about the indie dance band Saint Etienne. That is how the band get their name. And that obviously set us thinking about bands that are named after football teams. And you sort of immediately think it's going to be a really great gold mine of stuff. The Kaiser Chiefs, named after Leeds captain at the time, Lucas Radibi's former club. But actually, it turns out beyond that, it's not great, is it, Jamie?
No, it's not. I was very excited by this challenge, and I was straight like you, Kaiser Chiefs, and I'm like, this is a great start. And then it kind of goes a bit slow after that, and I was really struggling. And to kind of really demonstrate how much I was struggling, I kind of came up with Danny Wilson, a band from the 80s, a Scottish band from the 80s. And that was a tenuous link to the Northern Ireland footballer and Sheffield Wednesday player manager, Danny Wilson. And after that, I was super struggling. You'd think it would be, like you say, quite an easy thing to do. And the best I could come up with, and I started looking online for this, was Wet, 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 sponsored Clydebank in the early 1990s. So that was a sweet little mystery.
Very good, very good. Danny Wilson, of course, played for Luton Town as well, who we talked about on the pod last week. And I'm not giving up totally on the bands yet, but yes, Luton Town. One of the themes that came up on that was siblings, because obviously the Steen brothers, and we had a bit of feedback around that. Russ has mentioned to us, one of our listeners. He mentioned the QPR twins, in fact, Ian and Roger Morgan, who played for around the late 60s, 70s. Not a pair of players I'm particularly familiar with, but what I liked about it when I looked into it was that as identical twins, the two deliberately adopted different hairstyles for when they played for QPR, so that they could be told, people could tell them apart. So there was at least one footballing siblings playing in the same team. Jamie, anything from your side?
Well, on QPR, actually, didn't you have Anton and Rio Ferdinand playing at QPR at the same time? They definitely both played at QPR, but I don't know if they were there at the same time, with Rio spending the last part of his career there. But yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of siblings that we could reference, because when we brought it up last week, we kind of come across the Wallace brothers, which is a great shout. But yeah, you got the Xhaka brothers, Granit and Toulon, who one plays for Switzerland, the Swiss national team, one plays for the Albanian national team, and they played against each other. And that references the Botangs that we talked about last week in Jerome and Kevin Prince, who goes by the name of Prince. But yeah, it turns out there are quite a few, especially in the English league as well. Gary and Brian Robson, Ray and Graham Wilkins. I think you got Bradley Wright Phillips and Sean Wright Phillips also played. So there, and obviously the Nevilles, goes without saying. So there are English football in particular seems to be littered with lots of siblings.
I like Mike and Steve Gatting. It's sort of more obvious which one could do 90 minutes around a pitch than the other, but
I forget that Mike Gattin actually did play professional football. I always remember Ian Botham, because he's the famous answer to that quiz question, isn't it? Some four players that have captained England. Yes. But yeah, I forgot, mate. Mike Gattin played football. That is incredible. Did he play in goal?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know whether did Mike Gattin. Well, Steve Gatting definitely did. I'm not sure if Mike Gatting did. I'm going to have to go and check that out. But in my quest for a football band reference, fortunately, things sort of came together in bringing these two themes together. So I kind of gave up on the bands because there weren't really a lot of bands. But I thought, well, I'm in the football research state of mind, and I thought, well, there's a great track on a Billy Bragg album from the late 90s called God's Footballer. And I thought, well, I've always wondered who that song is about. I'm sure it's about someone. It's credited, almost certainly is about a chap called Harry Knowles. Not Harry Knowles, Peter Knowles. It's a great song, includes the brilliant line, he scores goals on a Saturday and saves souls on a Sunday. And it's a fascinating story. So Peter Knowles joins Wolves as a 17-year-old. It's hugely promising. They give him a 6-year contract, which is pretty much unheard of at the time. And then over the course of the few years, he kind of develops a bright reputation. Wolves are a bit up and down, but he's sort of very well established. He makes himself, he gets into the England under-23 squad, gets a few caps there. He's right on the fringes of the England squad. But he also, he becomes a Jehovah's Witness. And at the start of, I think it's the 1969 season, he says, well, I'll carry on playing football, but the course of my life is sort of changing. What's important to me is changing. My ambitions are changing. Scores in the first three games, gets to the 8th game of the season, a 3-3 draw with Notts Forest, and then just says, that's it. I'm giving up football. I'm going to, giving his life over to God and to a sort of a greater calling, I guess. And he was only 23 at the time he did this. And because I think no one believed he wouldn't come back, because, he had this whole career ahead of him, the whole opportunity. No one believed he wouldn't come back. Apparently they at Wolves, they kept his contract going and kept everything so that, expecting him to walk back through the door, which he never did. The added thing to this is that he is a footballing sibling, because his brother was Cyril Knowles, who was the fullback for Tottenham for many years. And bringing everything full circle, Cyril Knowles is, of course, the person that the 1973 hit "Nice One, Cyril" is about. So there you go. You have siblings and you have music all in one story.
That is fantastic, and I love the Cyril Noel song. Is always going to be a crowd favorite, isn't it? Because of the raw simplicity. Nice one, Cyril. Nice one, son. Nice one, Cyril. Or have another one. Love it. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
So we should get on with our teams for this week. It's just a two-hander, just me and Jamie this week to take us through. And first up, we're going to go to Saint Etienne. So yeah, Saint Etienne. It's an incredible story, really, because they absolutely dominate French football for a period of time like you couldn't really believe. Yet, I think to anyone following football after the early 80s, I mean, Saint Etienne don't really mean a great deal to anyone, do they, Jamie?
Other than your reference as a 90s indie pop band, really, that's the main kind of reference that you would probably have if you googled Saint Etienne. That's what you would get.
But I suppose it partly comes from Saint Etienne not even being a particularly well-known place in France, is it? I had to look up where it is. It's in the Loire Departement, or which I guess is in the Loire Valley. Have you ever been there?
I have. It's in the southwest. It's about 60 kilometers from Lyon, and it's in the Massif Central, which is always a popular stage or two on the cycling Tour de France. When the riders go through the Massif Central, I have been there, and you're right. It's not really on your top 10 lists of cities to visit in France when you're kind of looking at those Lonely Planet guides. But it's a really quaint and beautiful little city, and it's got a rich history. It's part of the industrial age. It's a coal mining town. It used to produce a lot of furniture, weapons, bikes, and stuff for Europe. So it's this real industrial town, and I had the pleasure of visiting the coal mine, which closed in 1973, but then reopened again in the early 1990s as a coal mine museum, and it's absolutely breathtakingly fascinating, as you can imagine, for any coal mine museum.
This is good detail. I didn't realise you'd been there. That is quite impressive. It is interesting. I mean, the football team is probably what this city is most known for. And Saint Etienne were, really established team, right down to probably most famous, potentially, for their green kit. Would that be fair? You didn't get many teams in green.
No, and you still don't. I really like this Saint Etienne green kit, but I don't really like green kits at all. I have to be honest. I mean, we've done a couple of teams that play in green kit, and I guess they're teams that we've actually liked and quite enjoyed their green kit. Zaire, for instance, we love the Zaire kit. We think that's a wonderful kit, although sometimes it's yellow and they don't always get the shorts correct as we learn. But the Saint Etienne green kit's quite nice because it's got those little touches of the tricolour, the French tricolour on the sleeves and on the collar of the shirt, and it just kind of gives it that little flash of colour, which makes it quite sexy. But I did a bit of research on football kits and colours, and Gola, that incredible shoe and shirt manufacturer, did some research on green kits and their success. And it's based on Premier League football teams. And this may give us a little insight as to why Saint Etienne weren't able to go on and be the first French team to win a European Cup, falling at the final hurdle against Bayern Munich in 1976. So it turns out, of all the colour kits that have been worn in the Premier League since its inception right through, because obviously football began when the Premier League began, and so the English football.
Absolutely.
That's the benchmark of everything. So up until I think the 2020 season, and the kits we've got blue, we've got gold, we've got black, we've got white, we've got red, we've got claret yellow, you'll be pleased to know, purple, navy, sky blue, clearly, turquoise, grey, pink, orange, green, all the colours of the rainbow included in this spot of analysis. And of all of those kit colours, green is rock bottom with the win rate. 21.3% win ratio in a green kit. And to just give you some context, the next one above it is pink with 25%. And you wouldn't be surprised to learn that red at 44.5% is the most prominent kit when it comes to win percentages. And also the green kit takes the prize for the best loss ratio as well. So with draws, you could claw it back and you may not finish bottom of the loss ratio, but the green kit has a loss ratio of 50.6%. So in a green kit, you're generally going to be losing every other football match based on those statistics provided by Gola.
Wow. That is impressive. I suppose the defence that must be largely based on away kits, mustn't it? I can't think of a team that Plymouth would be the only team that springs to mind who would be in a home green kit.
It really is, which does skew the statistics, because if teams are primarily playing from home, they've also got the disadvantages that come with that. And just to kind of make a note, there are 3 teams in the Premier League kicking off right this weekend, or this last weekend actually, that will be wearing green away kits. One of them being Liverpool, one of them being Newcastle, although it looks a bit kind of Saudi Arabian green. And the other one, Manchester United, traditionally always wear a green away kit, will be lining up next season in a green away kit. So already I'm feeling a bit disillusioned about Manchester United's chances of winning a Premier League next year.
It's not promising. Well, Les Verts, as I think St Etienne were known, they did go on an extraordinary run of success. They go on to win La Liga 10 times over a sort of 20-year period or so. But it's interesting that it doesn't actually happen sort of overnight for them. I mean, their first league title in 1956, and then actually they get relegated. It's not as though there's an immediate great success for that team, is there?
No, it's a golden period, but it's a golden period that laps a good 20 odd years in terms of its dominance, and they are up and down. And it's strange in terms of how this relates to the history of Ligue 1 and French football. So Ligue 1 really never really took shape until just after the Second World War. It was formed professionally before the Second World War, just before actually. So obviously it was paused and then it kicked on. But you had Stade de Reims, who went to the very first European Cup final and lost to Real Madrid. Real Madrid had nicked their best player, Raymond Kopa, just before that game, and he played in that game. And you could question, was his heart really in it against his new club? But if you think about European football and European dominance, there's always the big teams. In Spain, we've got Real Madrid and Barcelona, and they've been omnipresent. In Germany, we have Bayern Munich. In England, we have Liverpool, we have Manchester United. There's always been a dominant force in those leagues. In Ligue 1, in French football, there isn't a dominant force. You could argue that maybe PSG are that now, they're backed by the Qataris, but there's never been a dominant period. And Saint Etienne in this period fall into that bracket, and then they slip out of it. And then we have to wait another 20 years until Lyon come along, Olympique Lyonnais, and they dominate, and then they fall out. And then we now have Paris. So there hasn't really been that dominant team in France that has capitalized in terms of trophies and European presence as we have in the top 3 leagues.
I suppose there is an element to which there's a slight lack of French heritage of club football at that stage, to some extent, outside of France, which goes some way to perhaps the reason why Saint Etienne kind of go a little bit under the radar, I guess. When you actually go through the squad and the players and the notable players in that team, there aren't many household names or on an international scale. Obviously, Michel Platini, and we'll come on to him, is a big standout. Although actually within Saint Etienne's history, he's not actually even that successful, or he's right at the tail end of it. I was struck when I looked through. I kept expecting to see a name of a player who stood out on that international scale, and it just doesn't seem to be there for me.
No, Platini comes really after. I mean, our focus, obviously, we're building up the context of who Saint Etienne are and as an established force in French football. But our concentration really comes around the mid-1970s, and that's the team we're focused on, the team that won 3 championships back-to-back in Ligue 1, and they also went to the European Cup final and lost to Bayern Munich. They lost to Bayern Munich the previous year in the semi-final, and then the following season, after they've lost the final, they go on and they go out to Liverpool in the quarter-final, and Liverpool go on and win the Champions League. So this particular team is where we've got our starts, and I think the only one I really kind of picked out was Jean-Claude Santini, which is Jacques Santini as we know him, who was a bit of a maverick of French football. We probably know him because he had a spell in, a very, very brief spell with Tottenham Hotspurs as a manager. But you're right. I mean, I was surprised because I remember as a kid growing up, and remembering St Etienne and a bit like Borussia Mönchengladbach, when you're a kid, these names and you think they're big organized football teams, and you only realize, as you get older that they were provincial teams that have kind of come through and done something of interest or any note in European football, and they're of the time when you're growing up, but generally they aren't established in terms of like the big clubs.
It's really probably from sort of the mid-60s that the Saint Etienne start dominating French football, at least. So they start winning Ligue 1 regularly, then win the cups. They did the double several times, I think.
Yeah, they do something extraordinary. Doesn't happen that often in professional football. They win the second division, the second tier, as we like to call it, in the 65-66 season, and they go on immediately to win the top tier, Division 1, in the following season, which doesn't, it doesn't happen anywhere now unless it's kind of lower leagues, but in major leagues around the world, it's very rare that you would have a team that would come up from a lower division and then win the main division, Division 1, as it was in this case. And then they go on and they win it again for the next 3 years. So they only come up and win the league. They then win it 4 years on the trot, which is an extraordinary achievement.
It's sort of Nottingham Forest-like. There aren't many teams, many teams that do it, and it sets up. There are sort of quite a lot of similarities actually with this team sort of coming from nowhere, dominating for a whole period of time. Where I suppose the analogy disappears is that Nottingham Forest were hugely successful in Europe, which is not something that St Etienne were able to do. But the closest they come, and this is sort of the team, I guess, peak St Etienne, 75, 76, I think it is, Bayern Munich at Hampden Park. And so, reaching the European Cup final in itself is an achievement, although it's probably not quite as it would be now.
Yeah, the differences are extraordinary. But I think your Nottingham Forest reference is really good because, this is something you can unpick in European football for how French clubs have performed. Since when you consider, digressing here, Graham, my apologies. When you consider France's contribution to football, they've been responsible for setting up FIFA, and the headquarters are originally in Paris. They've been responsible for setting up UEFA, and the headquarters were originally in Paris. The birth through the journalists through L'Equipe, they've created this European Cup competition. And of course, we've got Jules Rimet, who was the architect of the World Cup. So France's contribution to international football is pretty incredible. But France's contribution to winning European club competitions is pretty pathetic. And Nottingham Forest is a great reference because Nottingham Forest is a provincial, it's an anomaly. It's bizarre how Nottingham Forest not only came up from Division 2 and being champions to win Division 1, as you rightly mentioned, but then go on to win 2 European Cups, which 2 European Cups is actually more European Cups from Nottingham Forest than all of the French clubs put together. Only Marseille in 1992-93, a team we're going to talk about in the very near future, are the only French club to have won the European Cup. And beyond that, the only other European trophy, I think, is Paris Saint-Germain won the Cup Winners' Cup in 96. So even though we're talking about how the tournaments were structured, and they were, you've got 32 participating teams back in the 1970s. And this was how the European Cup was structured, where you have the champions, and it's just the champions. For those who don't know, and I'm sure everyone does know this, the European Cup was just restricted to the national champions of that league. And that went on right through to the early 1990s through the birth of the Champions League. And then it's just kind of exponentially grown from then on. But if you're a team from a big nation, Germany, England, France, Italy, Spain, the odds are in your favor to go to the latter stages. So to kind of give you an example, Saint Etienne, who get to the final, only play a first round match, a second round match, a quarterfinal, and a semi-final. They played 8 games to get to the final. Now, in today's money in the Champions League, 8 games gets you to the round of 16. So you're not even at a quarter-final once you come through your 8 games there.
An altogether different challenge, but they do have this chance in that 75-76 season to make their mark in history. They're up against very good Bayern Munich side, it has to be said. They put on quite a decent show in the final itself, but still come out on the wrong side of a 1-0 against the Germans.
It's uncanny how West Germany has always found a way through international and club sides to just win football matches. Because, St Etienne, I mean, when you watch the highlights back on YouTube and when you read the articles, the second-hand accounts of that football match, St Etienne are the dominant team. They are the team that should be coming away with the European Cup. And just on that, it's bizarre. When I talk about the European Cup, it should really be called the Champions League back then because it was just for the champions, where by now it should be called the European Cup. So terminology there. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those where the big team, in this case it was Bayern Munich, they were the big team, end up winning. It's not the fairy tale that we had with Luton Town last week, talking with the Arsenal in the League Cup final. St Etienne, for all of their brilliance and all of their dominance, are unable to break down the Bayern team, and they come away with a solitary 1-0 defeat.
I was really impressed watching the game. There were only 2 bits of the commentary that I was able to pick out, my French language skills being really poor. One was Beckenbauer, which is very good. So Beckenbauer, and the other was the keeper almost lets one through. And I'm sure there's an ooh la la, which I didn't think actually. I thought was sort of a made up cliche. If something's close and that is what ooh la la sounds like, it. That's what it should be for. So the Saint Etienne side, they almost do it in 75-76. It then becomes something of a quest, and actually I think having come so close, they want to achieve at European level to prove themselves. And it's interesting, you see it now, you see, all sort of talk, that's really what Pep was dominating Pep's thoughts. That's why he bought Haaland, this ambition of winning the Champions League. And for St Etienne, they want to do that. In 1979, they give it their ultimate best shot, because they basically buy not only the best French footballer at the time, probably potentially the best footballer in the world at the time, Michel Platini. And he joins in 1979, and they theoretically are ready to go and achieve this dream. But it doesn't really work out that way, does it?
No, and it's a shame for Platini. Growing up as a kid, he absolutely, along with Brian Robson, he was one of my heroes for the style of the way he played, but also the style of the way he wore his shirt. His shirt would, just about cover his shorts, and I always found, and his socks would always be rolled down to his ankles, and I just thought, that's how you play football. It's not about what you do on the pitch. It's what you look like on the pitch. And he had it nailed.
Absolutely.
But he was an incredible, incredible talent. But yeah, it doesn't work out. So St Etienne win a championship with Platini there. It's their 10th. And their final, and this whole kind of dominant period is coming to and drawing to a close. They go into the European Cup and they have to face a preliminary round. It's only a one-off game. It's only 2 teams, St Etienne and a team called Dynamo from East Germany, that they have to play to qualify to get to the first round proper. And it's not the FA Cup when we say that, yeah. And they play this at the end of August, and they draw the first game at home, and then they lose away 2-0. So they're out before the European Cup has started. Michel Platini and St Etienne are out of the European Cup, and they won't be returning because they're not going to win a league championship again, sadly.
Yes, and that was the only year they qualified for it. In fact, they didn't win after winning the Liga in 75-76. They won the league title in 80-81, and that's to be their 10th and last win. Platini leaves at the end of the 82 season, goes on to more great things at Juventus. For St Etienne, it starts to slip away. There's a financial scandal, which kind of semi-prompts their relegation a couple of years later. And pretty much from that moment on, they're bouncing around between the top division and the league below. Never again troubling travelling the scorers when it comes to Ligue 1 or even very much European football.
No, they just fall out of the top league, and they flirt between the top league and the second league over the next 20, 30 years, and they remain in League Two right now. So the heights, the giddy heights that this particular team achieved during the 1970s into the early 1980s, that is the pinnacle of this big and great football club.
What's really interesting about this is that as Saint Etienne, as their winning run comes to an end, so PSG sort of take on the mantle. I mean, as you say, it takes them a while to get to the domination of where they are. But PSG's only formed in 1970, isn't it, from a merger of clubs as the current, so they're not even around at the point Saint Etienne are winning their games. And I think they win their first silverware in 1982, 86. I think they win their first win Ligue 1 for the first time. And Saint Etienne hold their record of 10 league titles is only this last year that it's been surpassed by PSG, who now look as they're going to win it, probably forevermore.
Yeah, it is incredible, and it does kind of emphasize that there is no dominant force in French football. It's a shared league, which makes it quite exciting in my view, because probably not so much now, although Lille did manage to win a championship just a couple of years ago in this PSG dominated era. But yeah, up until recent times, I think last season, as you mentioned, St Etienne were the only ones that were allowed to wear the gold star, which is something they do in Ligue 1. So if you've won 10 championships similar to Serie A, you can wear and put a gold star on your shirt. And now St Etienne are no longer the sole members of that club. And I think it's worth noting in between as well, they're neighbours. So whilst Paris obviously are garnering this dominance that they have become today, and they are a massive football club, in between that, you've got Saint Etienne's neighbours, you can say, 60 kilometres away, Lyon, Olympique Lyonnais, who won 7 championships. Now, they've only ever won 7 championships in their history, and they won 7 championships in a row. It's quite incredible when you think that a team can dominate so much in a single league. You kind of think about Celtic or Rangers or Bayern Munich, but a team where you've got no dominant team, and then one comes along and wins the league every single season. And I guess we kind of got that with Paris in the moment as well in Ligue 1. Yeah, it's quite incredible. But Lyon, again, like St Etienne, have kind of slipped away. We don't really see Lyon competing for the top prizes in French football, European football anymore.
Just as a last footnote on this, whilst I was doing some research on Michel Platini, you had, whilst it wouldn't have gone down as a triumph of his career at Saint Etienne, he had a good record there. I think he scores 58 goals in 104 games, so goal every 2, which is not too shabby. But once I was there, I stumbled upon this weird, because I was curious who he played for, and he played for Nancy beforehand, and then Saint Etienne obviously, and Juventus, and for France, and perhaps less obviously Kuwait.
It's bizarre. 21 minutes apparently. It's a really bizarre football fact, and it kind of, I don't know, this is probably unfair, but maybe it gives us an insight into what Michel Platini as a retired footballer is to become, because you would imagine his appearance fee would have been somewhat nice to play for a second nation. Now, it's not uncommon for players to play for 2 international teams. It's happened a number of times, but generally there's a link between the player and the second team that they go to. They're either born there, or their family members are born there, or they've got some kind of affiliation. So it's not unusual to see, or in the case of Dejan Stankovic, incredibly, played for 3 nations, and he was always the same, but the nation changed around him. It was Yugoslavia, and it was Serbia and Montenegro, and then it was just Serbia. But Platini seems to be a bizarre one. Presumably you don't need to have Kuwaiti nationality to play for Kuwait.
It wasn't obvious to me that Michel Platini needed to play 21 minutes after his retirement in a friendly for Kuwait to cap off his career. But there you go. That's what happened all the same.
So I have a theory that maybe the reason why Platini potentially played for the Kuwaiti national team, could go right back to 1982. And I don't know if you remember, in the 1982 World Cup, France played Kuwait. Kuwait had qualified for their first and only World Cup finals in Spain, 1982. They played a group game, Kuwait against France, and Michel Platini would have been on the pitch. And I don't know if you remember, the Kuwaiti prince at the time, I think it was I think he may have been the Kuwaiti president, I'm not sure, Prince Fahid, walked onto the pitch just protesting of a goal, and the referee succumbed to the protest and changed his mind and decided the goal that France scored actually will be chalked off. And maybe on the way off, the Kuwaiti prince just had a word with Michel Platini and said, look, to give you some kind of recompense, if you fancy it, there's a game for you waiting in Kuwait. Just let me know and we can get you in the side.
Yeah, absolutely surreal. That's kind of the original VAR in many ways. Instead of going to Stockley Park, you invite the manager, the head of the country's FA comes onto the pitch to ask for it to be changed. So we should be thinking about Saint Etienne's place in the grand history of football and football greatness. Jamie, what's your thinking on Saint Etienne?
Well, immediately, if I am a St Etienne football fan in my 50s or 60s, then these are all-time greats, because they would be the only reference I would have to talk about major success and good times. And I'm sure St Etienne fans have had a good time, but this would be the major reference. But this, for me, I mean, they've won championships in Ligue 1 and they have created their own history, but Ligue 1 is not a super competitive league, as we discussed, in terms of like a dominating team. So I kind of feel I should be going, this is a touch of greatness, but I'm really going to put the cat amongst the pigeons and say, I think this is a contender for blinkered greats.
Oh, I love that thinking. Blinkered greats. Wow. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I was thinking touch greatness for the same reasons you say. You can't. They have failed really to achieve at the highest level at the European stage, and it's difficult to argue that winning that title 10 times. I mean, when you say that, it does sound quite impressive. In fairness, that is quite an achievement.
Really? Yeah.
But it isn't the strongest league in Europe or in world football. So True Great feels like the obvious place, but I do like the blinkered greats logic, which is, so when you think about blinkered greats, I think I'd initially thought, oh well, that's for people who are teams who obviously aren't great, but we just like them because we love them. So there's an element to that, but I think unbelievably, I think I'm coming around to your thinking on this possibly. I mean, Saint Etienne, they had this status which is extraordinary, yet arguably that isn't warranted in that level. So they're clearly the best side in our blinkered great category that we're ever going to have. But do you know what? I think I'm going to roll with it. I think I'm going to go for it. I think Saint Etienne, blinkered greats. So next up, we are going back to 1976 and Czechoslovakia. And what a team this was. Well, what a team is it? Why are we talking about Czechoslovakia 1976? To the untrained eye, Jamie, there doesn't really seem any reason we'd be picking this side out.
Wow, I mean, there's a lot of history here. This is the continuation of our summer of 76 with St Etienne and reaching the final. So Czechoslovakia have a very rich and important history in football. They've got to 2 World Cup finals in the 30s and the 60s, and they've been runners-up to Italy and Brazil. They produced some of the most amazing players. Josef Manipust is probably one of the greatest footballers of all time. Would definitely be in the FIFA top list when you're compiling greatest footballers. And this particular team, albeit its greatness is to be determined, went into the 1976 European UEFA finals, which was only a 4-team event. We have 24 teams competing in the current version in the finals. This was 4 teams, and they were by far and away the underdog of the piece. They go there and compete against the host team, Yugoslavia, the current world champions and European champions, West Germany, and the total football brilliance of Johan Cruyff's Netherlands.
I mean, that is the most extraordinary part to this. And I did think, and we will come on to it, the way they win it and the player who does it is really what brings this up a notch. But actually, I became obsessed when I looked at this. 4 teams, a 4-team tournament. And so qualification became, a much bigger thing. There were 8 groups and you had to win your group. And then even once you've won your group, you don't get to the tournament. You then have to play a quarter-final beforehand. And it is quite impressive. I mean, this Czechoslovakia team, they hadn't qualified for the 74 World Cup, hadn't qualified for the 1978 World Cup. And so Czechoslovakia are going there with no great form behind them, I guess, but they win their qualifying group. They knock England out of that group. Ironically, 1978 Scotland knock Czechoslovakia out of their qualifying group, so it's all quite impressive. But they do qualify, get through to their quarterfinal. They have a quarterfinal where they play and beat Russia over 2 legs to qualify for the 1976 tournament. And as you say, it is a 4-team tournament. Just very simple. I mean, it does seem a bit absurd then to have a 3rd and 4th place quite a game amongst only 4 games in a tournament. But there is only 4 games. All of them go to extra time. I think that's another novelty. I don't think there's any other tournament where every game has gone to extra time. But Czechoslovakia have to do it the hard way because they draw Netherlands, who I think arguably are the hardest team in the group. The Netherlands had beaten Belgium 7-1 over 2 legs in the playoffs. They'd obviously got to the final of the 1974 World Cup. They get to the final of the 1978 World Cup. They have Johan Cruyff. They are quite a good team.
They are an exceptional team. One we're yet to cover, but we will at some point. I think that would be a 2-hour special potentially because tactically they were genius. And I mean, it's brilliant because they're playing in Zagreb and it's horrendous conditions. It's June and it is absolutely pouring down with rain. The whole match is absolutely hammer it down with rain. This is really the birth of where we see the Netherlands find a way to fight amongst each other. Now they have a reputation, and I think this is potentially the birthplace of when this happens. Johan Cruyff, absolute superstar, one of the greatest footballers ever played, one of the greatest football minds that's ever been involved in the game. He's fallen out with his teammates, and this sows the seeds of when he decides he's not going to go to the 1978 World Cup finals unless he's traveling on his own with his family because he doesn't want to go with his teammate. Long before Dennis Bergkamp decided he didn't want to travel at all, Johan Cruyff is picking his own flight. And you've got something that happens in this particular game that's just fantastic. You've got the same player scoring for both teams, which is amazing. When you look at the scoreboard at 1-1, you've got the same player. Andreas is given the lead to the Czechoslovakian team and they're 1-0 up. And then with less than 20 minutes go, he slices, a ball comes in and he classically tries to clear it and it slices off and kind of goes into the net and his goalkeeper's got no chance. So the scoreboard is brilliant. When you look at the YouTube clip, you've got Czechoslovakia 1, Netherlands 1, and you've got Andreas, the goal scorer for both teams, which is brilliant. It always reminds me of the Manchester City FA Cup final against Tottenham Hotspur and what's his name? Hutchinson, wasn't it?
Tommy Hutchinson,
yeah.
So that game, as all the games do, goes to extra time, and Czechoslovakia come out on top.
They do, and there is an idea that this will be the first international game where the penalty kick will be seen. Where a penalty shootout will be seen. The penalty shootout hadn't been in place for a long time. I think it was I think out of again, there's a bit of conflict about where the penalty shootout comes from. So previously to the penalty shootout, the way that games were decided in knockout competitions was if you couldn't play a replay, you would toss a coin or you would draw lots, and that would be how you would advance or not advance to the next stage of the tournament. And quite rightly, some people didn't like this system. They didn't feel it was based on skill. I mean, there's not a lot of skill you can do with coin tossing, although I guess you can. I've kind of been able to kind of load up the head side thinking I could toss this, and it's definitely come back on the head side. So I think it was an Israel game against Bulgaria in the 1968 Olympics where one of the Israeli officials took exception to the way that Israel were knocked out of the tournament by the drawing of lots, and came to FIFA with this idea that, you know, maybe we should have a different system. And out of that, or maybe it came from a German referee, a dentist on the part-time. We've talked about those before with Iceland. It was one of those kind of suggestions that came. It was a bit like points of view. Somebody had suggested, you know, their points of view. How about instead of having a coin toss to decide major championship football matches, we have a contest where players line up and take it in turns to take penalty shootouts until we have a victor. It was almost like one of those moments in terms of where the idea of the penalty shootout came from.
And Barry took the idea, and there we go. We'll run on with it. Points of view. I think that's the most random and least likely cultural reference we've managed to pull in.
Well, I show my age every week, I think, Graham.
It would have been good if they'd, you know, maybe mix the two and gone with the coin toss, but you had players linking arms on the, you know, and they had to step up to the centre circle. And but it doesn't go. That one doesn't go to a penalty shootout.
No, it doesn't. The Czech team get 2 goals in added time in the rain. There are 3 sending offs. The first, the Czechoslovakian player, and then there's a couple from the Dutch team that are imploding in front of us that get sent off. And it all hands the advantage to Czechoslovakia, who are able to win the game 3-1 and advance to the final.
And in the final, they meet West Germany, and they make a fantastic start.
Yeah, so for Czechoslovakia to be 2-0 up after 25 minutes in a major final against the holders and arguably the best team in the world at that time is quite incredible. And they come very close to making it 3. And then shortly after that, Müller pulls one back for Germany, 2-1. And it stays like that right up until the very end.
So yes, it's very near the end, an 89th minute equaliser for West Germany, a near post header from a corner. Frustrating goal to give away after a whole period of backs to the wall defending. I was watching this game on YouTube, and I very much enjoy the shot of I think it's the German bench where in amongst it all, you know, these fantastic Adidas tracksuits there. You know, it's all a great look. 1970s Adidas tracksuits, classic stripes. But there's a guy there who I think might be the manager who appears to be rocking a kind of a Yorkshire flat cap from what I can see. Yes,
I think it's Helmut Scholf, the West German manager. I think he was famous for wearing it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure in the 1974 World Cup, you see him again donning the same look with that lovely Adidas tracksuit and the Yorkshire flat cap. He's just a whippet and a couple of pints of warm ale away from being a true Yorkshireman.
So this game does go to extra time, and there are no goals in extra time, and so we do get to penalties, which is really where this story comes to life. I think the first 3 penalties are scored by both sides, and then Czechoslovakia, I think, go 4-3 up, and then I think West Germany miss the all-important kick. So there's a chance now for Czechoslovakia to win. All they've got to do is score the next one. They've got to beat Sepp Maier. Sepp Maier was big, talismanic German goalkeeper. So, you know, it's no easy task, but up steps one man, and that man, not only does he score, but he creates a legacy, doesn't he?
He absolutely makes a statement in the sand in terms of history, football history. He becomes a footballing verb, something that we've enjoyed as well. But it nearly never happened, because if we go back to the 89th minute equaliser, it's pretty much the last kick of normal play. It comes from a corner, and that corner is massively disputed. So this moment that we've led to with this change of history with the penalty kick is absolutely fantastic. But this all comes about because of the rule change, because we've got penalty kicks now decided. And what's interesting is the rule at the time for the final in this particular tournament was there would not be penalty kicks. It would go to a replay. And the West German team, in the hours before the final, were in dialogue with UEFA to say, let's just go to penalty kicks. And whatever the detail and the outcome of that conversation was, that penalty kicks was the way that this football match was going to be decided in the event that the two teams couldn't be separated by 120 minutes of football. So why we got this rule change in penalty kicks? Well, we've talked about drawing lots and tossing a coin. It's not really a fair system. I think television influences this. The 70s again, here we are in the 70s, the most amazing kind of explosive decade where so much is going on in not just football, but sport. Television is really taken a bounce. In the 1970 World Cup, we've seen that. We've talked about the great Brazilian team from 1970 and where television plays an important role. So football has become entertainment. It's reaching people's television sets, and people are buying more television sets, not just in Europe and in North America, but also in places in Africa and Asia. European football, world football is now landing in people's living rooms. So you have to make football entertaining, and replays aren't entertaining. If the game ends, it's not entertaining. So you've got the birth of the penalty kick. This is the first time most people would be seeing a tournament decided by, or a football match being decided by penalty kicks. But it did happen before, and it happened in English football for the first time in 1970. Now, there's some argument that Italy and Yugoslavia will say they were using penalty kicks in the 50s and 60s. But in terms of my point of reference, the earliest record I can find where a penalty shootout took place was in English football between Hull City and Manchester United, and it happened in the Watney Cup, a 4-year tournament from the early 1970s, dreamed up and sponsored by the Watney Man Brewery, where across the 4 English divisions, the teams that had scored the most goals would go into the Watney Cup. And Hull City and Manchester United had drawn. It'd gone to penalty kicks. And do you know the very first player to take and score a penalty kick in English football? Do you know who that player was?
Well, it's got to be someone like Dennis Law or George Best.
George Best. Absolute great knowledge, Graham. Fantastic. And do you know the first player to miss a penalty kick? Also a Manchester United player at the time.
Oh, wow. Well, let's aim high. Let's go Bobby Charlton.
Oh, it's good. It's the third one of the Holy Trilogy, actually. So Dennis Law misses the first penalty kick. So penalty kicks have become a normalish thing in English league football, albeit in the lowly Watney Cup. But this occasion is massive. The European UEFA final, Czechoslovakia, West Germany. You've built it right up to the 9th penalty. Antonin Panenka is stepping up to take a penalty kick under incredible pressure. And he's been practicing something special for quite some time, hasn't he, Graham?
Yes, I'm sure everyone is familiar with this type of penalty now. But it is that trick of delaying the shot, waiting for the keeper to commit to his dive and then just gently chipping it down the middle, very slowly, very simply. It came about from Panenka, who was, an entertaining and maverick midfielder of his day, and was a regular penalty taker. And he talks about practicing every day against the same keeper, and the keeper would go that way. And he came up with the theory. It's like, my best chance doing it is he keeps diving. If I wait for him to dive and I just go down the middle, it will work. And he supposedly tried this a couple of times in league football before, but you don't have scores of data analysts. You don't have loads of TV footage, so nobody would have known this is a penalty trick that he had in his locker. Of course, nobody would ever have known, really. I mean, Germans didn't even think penalties were going to be happening up until the day of the game. So, it's not really anything anyone would have prepped for. So he had a small amount of evidence that this would work. And they always say to penalty takers, you shouldn't change your mind, you should do it. And he'd obviously set his mind of, I'm going to do this. This is definitely going to work. I'm going to do this. and amazingly does on the biggest stage. Sepp Maier goes to his left, and there's that ball that suddenly just gently chips down into the middle. It is a thing of wonder, and a thing of which, as you say, there are very few moves that are named after a player that have sustained so long.
It is, and it's used in commentary when players of the day that we live in now, when they attempt it, it's used as he tried the Panenka penalty and he got away with it. He tried the Panenka penalty and it looked awful, because it is one of those penalties that when it comes off, it's beautiful, it's stunning, it's a joke. When it doesn't come off, it's also a joke, but it's not beautiful and it's not stunning because it's a simple gabber for the goalkeeper, and it's a lot of egg on the face for the penalty taker.
And of course, if that had gone wrong, if he had attempted that and the keeper had just stayed still and it caught it, that would be up there with our friend from Zaire running out of the wall on and kicking the ball away. That would be on your top 100 World Cup, European Cup, international football bloomers. Probably nobody else would ever have attempted it again. It is so odd. I mean, it is the coolest thing you could possibly carry off. It is sort of in keeping with Panenka, the player himself, who had a very successful career within Czechoslovakia, but only within Czechoslovakia for a large period of it. He played for Bohemians because of the football system there. There was no sort of transfer, so he played all his career there. Bohemians never won anything. When he got into his 30s, he did finally move somewhere to win some honours. I can't think of any footballer who might be doing that now. And at the end of his career, he does join Rapid Vienna. I think he's one of the first players to be transferred actually out of Czechoslovakia. Joins Rapid Vienna and actually plays in that 1985 Cup Winners' Cup final against Everton, which we talked about on an earlier podcast. But he was very much a special player, did consider himself an entertainer. I think Pelé described him at the time, doesn't he? Say he's either a madman or a genius or something like that. It was such an odd thing to do.
I think this is almost like the 10,000 hours of practice. And I don't think he did 10,000 hours of practice in this penalty, but I think he practiced it enough to be confident that he was going to score, which kind of puts him more in the genius than madman, because I think he's prepared for it. And luck favours the prepared, I think, more so. So it's a fantastic way to win a major tournament. It's a fantastic way to write yourself into the history books. And he has become probably the greatest footballing verb, I would say. Just about beating the one we mentioned last week, the Klinsmann dive. I think the Panenka definitely tops that. But another thing we haven't really touched about on these four teams that have made it to the finals: Yugoslavia, they no longer exist as a nation. West Germany, they no longer exist as a nation. Czechoslovakia, the team in question, they no longer exist as a nation. 75% of the teams in the last four of this tournament no longer exist as nations, which tells us that politics absolutely is intrinsically linked to football internationally. Now, from a club perspective, maybe not so much, but internationally, football and politics go hand to hand. Without each other, they don't exist. And it's incredible to think that we've got these teams that no longer have an identity that they had back when this tournament was being played.
We just need Netherlands to something to happen to the Netherlands, and then we can complete the set. We should probably think about where this Czechoslovakia team sits in the global ranking of the world.
I think they fall under the football radar with this. I think they get lost in the archives a bit too much. It's a bit like when Spain and the USSR have won European championships in the past, before Spain dominated in the early 2000s. They had won a European championship, but it got lost because I think the people probably reflect on the tournament as not too serious. Football was still fairly young. International football was still really kind of growing into what it's become today. And I think Czechoslovakia sadly get lost in this, and we probably do forget that they've won a major European tournament. The thing that tips me into the bracket a touch of greatness for this particular team is the fact that they've won this, beating the Netherlands in the semi-final. They've beaten West Germany, the current world champions, in the final. And they've finished with the very last kick, albeit through an individual, with the most sublime penalty kick and fairy tale ending. And I think that's just a very beautiful story. And now we know and have the Panenka. And without that, we wouldn't be calling slowly chipped penalties that go in Panenkas. We'd be calling them something else.
I think there's almost an argument for not great, but without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. Because the legacy of the Panenka kick far outlives the legacy of that Czechoslovakia team and its achievements. I think that would just be a little harsh because it is quite impressive to have won the European Championship. I was definitely heading towards true greats, but it's a 14 tournament. It's a 14 tournament. The Dutch start fighting amongst themselves. It's a rainy day. They kind of stumble over the line against West Germany. I appreciate it's not easy to get to that tournament, but is that true greats? I think there is a true great amongst them, but I feel the rest of them maybe edge of greatness. Is that harsh?
I don't think it's harsh. And one thing you could add into that to help flavour you into the edge of greatness is that this particular team, through qualification, only lost one football match. And that football match was against England in 1976, 3-0 at Wembley. And Mick Shannon scored in that game. So I think, if anything, losing to an England team where Mick Shannon is scoring probably does demote you down from touch of greatness to edge of greatness. So maybe you've won this one.
That Wimbledon celebration we can put away once again. So I think we say Czechoslovakia, 1976, edge of greatness. One last bit. We should get into the time machine in this lot, but habit. We're just going back to 1976.
Do you know what? I'm going to go completely off piece with this because we are talking about the period of St Etienne and Czechoslovakia, and they are between 75 and 77. So in a bizarre way, and this goes right back to our very first podcast, I think, with Scott, and we talked about Malcolm MacDonald, or maybe it was the Hereford one with Scott. I can't remember. So Malcolm MacDonald, I think, only ever scored 5 goals for England, and they all came in the same match against Cyprus. I think I might be right on that. He may have scored an extra one.
They did, yeah.
England beat Cyprus 5-0 at Wembley, and Malcolm MacDonald scored all 5 goals. And I want to go back and see that. And because we're going back to this period, and you can probably call me out because I'm not relating it to Saint Etienne and I'm not relating it to Czechoslovakia. And I've not done this before when we've gone back in the time machine. I'm kind of abusing my token.
You're using the time machine as to get to where you're hitching.
Yeah,
with it.
Exactly that. And I think in the same way that the brilliant Mark Griffiths, who we had on for Wrexham, used his token to just go back to any point of Wrexham's history and not the last 2 years where we focus. I think he's kind of given us a glitch in the system, and I like it. So I'm one time only, and I accept that I'm probably going to get a yellow card for this. I'm going to, take advantage of that glitch, and I'm going to see Malcolm MacDonald score 5 goals for England. Are you sticking to form, or are you going to join me off piece?
Well, if by that you mean, am I going to stick to one of the two teams we've talked about? I'm controversially, I am. Do you know, obviously the Panenka is an unbelievable moment. That really should probably be it. But I think out of fascination, I would want to go and see Les Verts at Hampden Park and just really ascertain whether, were they any good? How good were they? That remains the kind of the mystery to me. So I'm going back to Hampden Park, 1976. I'm going to watch Saint Etienne come so close to beating Bayern Munich. So that's all we have time for this time. Jamie, thank you for your time again.
Welcome. I always enjoy it, even when it's just the two of us.
We will be back with a guest next time round, I suspect. You can, of course, contact us on our social channels to correct any of our obvious disasters or call Jamie out on his Time Machine Decision at catch us up by far the greatest FC, or by myself at Said and Done, and Jamie at Couch Pondito on the artist formerly known as Twitter. And if you've enjoyed listening, a reminder that you can subscribe to the podcast to get new episodes every Thursday. And we will speak again soon.